What are you talking about?
In the 2005 King Kong film by Peter Jackson, one of the wildest parts of the entire movie is when the crew we've been following falls directly into what can only be described as a pit straight out of the depths of hell. That's right, today we're going to be talking about the insect pit. Chasm, abyss, crevasse, there's many names for what it could be called, but I personally feel like insect pit is probably the most fitting title. Come with me today as we talk about its spineless inhabitants. It's time to enter the no-bone zone and talk about some giant invertebrates. So with the already shifting landscape of Skull Island, a large pit formed in the middle of it. This pit had become inhabited with an absolute menagerie of different invertebrates, most of which being massive hellish representations of what we already know as insects, and some looking completely alien altogether. One example that is altogether just alien and disgusting is the Carnictus sordicus, or the vile meat weasel. So it's hypothesized that sometime in a distant past, animals had fallen into this still-forming pit and tried to escape. Now these animals died, but the tapeworms inside of them made their way out and found a veritable buffet of nutrients in the decaying matter at the bottom of this chasm. Fast forward a couple thousand years, and these tapeworms have achieved a massive size of about 7 to 13 feet long and no longer need a host to survive or reproduce. These worms fed on basically anything unlucky enough to find itself at the bottom of the pit, with rows of razor-sharp teeth set into a retractable mouth. I remember when I was young, I saw this movie, and the scene where Lumpy gets eaten alive, oh my, quite literally haunted my nightmares for months. There's something about his muffled cries as he's slowly consumed alive by a pack of mindless, unthinking, predatory worms that can inspire absolute phobia in a child. And however, in a cruel twist of fate, these hulking worms fell prey to a disturbing form of parasitism from another inhabitant of the chasm. Which leads me into our second creature, the Arachnocidus, or arachnoclaw. This was a 4 to 6 foot species of predatory arthropod similar to a spider in appearance, and these were some of the first inhabitants of the pit to emerge when the crew of the SS Venture fell into the chasm. The arachnoclaw lays clutches of microscopic eggs in decaying matter at the bottom of the pit, and most are either destroyed or lost to the environment around them, but a few lucky eggs survive long enough to be consumed by the unknowing Carnictus. Once inside the worm, they live their first few years in the creature's guts as parasites, but after this time period, once a certain size is achieved, the adult arachnoclaw would then either exit its host through its nether regions, or simply chew its way out from the gut itself. I'm not entirely sure which one is worse, but once free, it scuttles off into the darkness to find a mate, and start the terrible cycle anew. There's also a scene where a trio of arachnoclaw toss around a crew member before ripping them apart to feed on. An absolutely horrific creature, all in all. Now, the third creature I'm going to mention kind of touches a nerve for me. I was bitten by one of those large brown ground crickets as a child, and it definitely left some impressions that have lingered. I'll touch on that later. This one is called the Wetterex, and as the name implies, it's a cricket of absolutely regal size. Distant relatives of the New Zealand species, these massive crickets grew to a staggering 2 to 3 feet in length, and unlike their Kiwi counterparts, this species was entirely predatory. Generally hunting in large packs, a group of these crickets could overcome and consume even the largest of Skull Island's local predators. In these group attacks, they functioned almost like piranha, shearing away massive chunks repeatedly until there was nothing left to gnaw on. Their mouthparts consisted of mandibles the size of your fist that acted just like a pair of massive scissors. Now, considering that giant weta in New Zealand can easily break human skin with a bite, and the Skull Island variety is about 10 times the size, I don't believe they'd have much of an issue chewing through even the toughest of dinosaur hides found on the island. In the short time that these guys had on screen, they almost made mincemeat out of Jack and several other characters, and in my opinion, there's just something not right about the jaws of these things. It just doesn't sit right with me. It's like modified meat shears attached to the frame of a giant cricket, and I already am not fond of crickets, but crickets that can bite my hand off, I'm even more not fond of. I just kinda hate them. Moving on to an entry that makes my skin crawl a heck of a lot less, and is our fourth and final mention of this episode, we're going to be talking about the Deplector, a land crab the size of a small car with mantis-like pincers that solidifies itself onto the side of the chasm while waiting for prey to pass by. We get an example of how they catch this prey in the movies, with some dude getting absolutely yoinked straight into the back rooms by a claw the size of his own body. but we don't really see much beyond that. Now, thankfully, the Kong Natural History book that goes along with this movie has some pictures of what this thing looks like beyond the claw, and it's pretty terrifying. I do, however, find it adorable how the males of this species are way smaller and just kind of hang out with their Amazonian GF in her home, and she's like 100 times bigger than he is. But it's almost like a rock crab and a mantis shrimp had a horrible love child that was somehow able to survive on land. And on that note, I'm going to end it. If you made it this far and enjoyed, stick around for the next part. I plan on making this into a series, as the creatures of Skull Island are just way too well thought out for me to not rant about. And on that note, I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching.